Good morning. I'm David Summers. I'm the publisher of the Long Beach Post and Long Beach Business Journal. This morning, I'm joined by Jeremiah Dobruck, who is our public safety and breaking news editor. Jeremiah is here to kind of talk through a story, a local story that's now making national news over the last couple days, and kind of talk us through questions that have come in from our readers in the community, and talk a little bit about the background of how the Post broke this story and reported the story and what's been going on since then. We are streaming live. We're taking your questions live. So if you do have any questions that you want to share with us, go ahead and put them into the comment threads wherever you're watching on social media. We keep an eye on those comments, and I'll try to get to as many of them as I can during this conversation with Jeremiah. But Jeremiah, you published a story last week on December 8th about an event with the Long Beach Police Department where the chief, Robert Luna, talked with hundreds of officers, many of them without masks. They were in the Long Beach Convention Center. And then over the past couple of days, that photo that you were able to get and broke that story, it's garnered a lot of national attention. Can you talk a little bit about the background of what happened and explain what that photo shows and why it's important?
Yeah, so that photo, there's actually two photos we're talking about. The first one that actually has sparked all this concern is a few rows of just hundreds of officers lined up, and almost none of them are wearing masks. And they're inside the Long Beach Convention Center. And what I found out was they were lined up essentially about to hear the chief speak. He was speaking to them after a weeks and weeks of training they'd done around election day. And if you remember back on election day, everybody was worried about there being possible unrest, especially after the protests and then the looting we'd had on May 31st after the George Floyd protests. So the police department had been doing these mass training drills. And after the final drill, the chief came to speak to the largest group of officers they'd ever had doing this training, and it was about 300 people. So there was an official department photo that was taken that was never made public until I started asking about it. But in that photo, most officers are wearing masks. But there were other photos that were given to me by concerned police officers that this could have been a problem, showing most of the department, or most of the people, most of about 300 people gathered there without their masks on. And this is obviously important because for months now, this photo was taken on November 5th. Months and months into the pandemic, after we've had health officials, city officials, everybody pleading with the public to please keep your masks on, stay socially distanced, and don't gather in large groups like this.
Jeremiah, tell us about the reporting on this. How did you get that photo in the first place, and how were you able to determine that it was legitimate from that event?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. This happened back on November 5th. Like I said, I didn't see this photo until early December. And that only happened because of concerned police officers within the department who talked to me about what happened. And they'd become concerned because shortly after this gathering, there was a surge of coronavirus cases in the Long Beach Police Department. They had about 45 cases since early November. And that, they're up at this point now, they're up over 72 cases total since the beginning of the pandemic. So you can see how fast the cases accelerated after this event.
And can you tell us, just to put that into context, what's the size of the department? Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
The department's about 800 officers when you're talking just about officers. So when I spoke to the chief about the number of cases in the department, he's put it very bluntly. He's really concerned about how many cases there have been. Obviously this can be a public safety issue if enough officers have to be quarantined or isolated or can't work. That does have an impact. None of them so far have gotten seriously ill, but that is something the department is certainly concerned about because COVID has really taken a toll on law enforcement this year. They do still have to show up and go to work and are exposed to all these things. And then the reason officers were concerned about this gathering was they felt like this was possibly putting them in harm's way on top of all of that. And to answer the other part of your question, the way we really authenticated this was I do have people within the department who I trust who were able to tell me about this, but I was able to verify what they were saying because I got the department's official photo from that day. I was able to compare it with the photo that was leaked to me and see, yes, okay, this does line up You can pick out specific people in that photo who are in both photos, and the way they're arranged, you can tell this was the same event where this happened. So in the official department photo, you see about 300 people, mostly wearing masks, still not all wearing masks. And then in the other photo that was taken prior to that, you see many more people without masks on. Almost all of them did not have masks on, and were still tightly packed together for at least 10 minutes while the chief was speaking.
Jeremiah, you have sources and there are people that you speak to at every rank, at every level within the department. What's been some of the reaction that you've heard about this within the ranks? People that have spoken to you on background or off the record, are rank and file, or officers and leaders in the department, are they upset about this? What was their reaction to this happening and to the aftermath?
Well, I mean, I think the reason I learned about this in the first place is because there are officers who were concerned about their own health and safety and the safety of their families. And they felt like this from the beginning of the pandemic, the top brass of the police department had been encouraging officers to wear masks, stay safe. But that message clearly wasn't sinking in if you look at this photo. And the officers who were concerned and spoke to me about this basically felt like that message of being careful, wearing your mask, staying distant, following all the coronavirus rules was undermined by having this massive group of people together. And of course, the department also says this was a necessary thing. This was a training exercise that had been ramping up for months and months and months and months because they were worried about unrest on election day that never ended up arriving. And this photo, though, was taken as the chief was addressing these officers after that, after all of those training exercises, which I think some officers felt like was a photo op of sorts that they didn't feel was necessary.
Jeremiah, you had an opportunity to speak to the chief about this. Did he have any reaction? Did he share anything with you about when he got up on that stage, when he looked out on that crowd and saw the number of people that weren't wearing masks from his own department? What was his own reaction to what he saw in the crowd that day? Did he share that with you?
You know, he said very bluntly he would have handled this differently in hindsight, and I think part of that is because it wasn't until after this event that the department really cracked down on mask wearing coronavirus rules. So up until this point, they had basically been encouraging officers to wear masks. And like many people, clearly that message wasn't sinking in when you see all these people without masks. But the department didn't go any further than that. It wasn't until about 2 weeks after this event, when cases started surging, when the coronavirus was really at the police department's door, they were having dozens and dozens of cases, that they threatened officers with discipline if they didn't wear their masks. So after this photo was taken, coronavirus started surging. Then the police department cracked down and said, if you do not wear your mask, you will be given a written warning. And then if you have another infraction, we can initiate discipline, anything from a suspension to ultimately termination. Obviously, it depends on how serious they think this officer is taking the rules or how serious the infraction is. But ultimately, it does start triggering this disciplinary process that can get progressively harsher and harsher if officers still don't wear their masks.
And do you know yet, Jeremiah, if any disciplinary action has been taken? Has that been revealed by the department?
We don't know yet. At that point, there hadn't been. It is certainly possible there's been some since then, but we don't really know. We do know that they have certainly come under a lot of pressure since this story came out. Like you said, just over the past couple of days, this photo has suddenly been everywhere, all across the country.
We're speaking with Jeremiah Dobruck, public safety editor, breaking news editor here at the Long Beach Post, about a story that he broke last week that's gained a lot of national attention. If you do have questions, if you have comments, questions for Jeremiah, please add them into the comment box. Jeremiah, I want to talk a little bit about the aftermath of what's been going on in the department. You did talk about the number of cases in the department, but did that event cause any within the department? What happened? We've covered quite a bit some of the aftermath over the last couple of weeks, but what's been the fallout in the department and things that they've had to do?
Yeah, so the police department is very clear, and they'll say we have not been able to link any specific cases back to this event. That's what
Mhm.
the police department is saying. But the bottom line is, so we don't know if any cases are linked back there, and we probably will never know. The It's very difficult to determine exactly where somebody got COVID-19 if they've been exposed in many different places. So the police department has tried to make it very clear we don't think, we don't know this specific event caused any cases. But part of the reason we decided this was a major story, I mean, the photo itself, you can look at it and see it's probably worth talking about. But the police department also said through their own contact tracing, they have found that their own officers not wearing masks inside police facilities has been one of the driving factors of the surge in the police department. They also said they've caught it from other areas, personal business from their family, but police officers not wearing masks has been a problem within the department and has, they think, caused COVID cases to rise.
So you mentioned police facilities. Can you talk a little bit about what's been happening in the Long Beach City Jail and what they've had to do as a result?
Yeah, there was an outbreak in among Long Beach City Jail staff, and to combat that, they actually had to transfer out all of the inmates in the Long Beach jail. And I don't remember exactly how many that was. It was a relatively small number, but they either had to transfer all those inmates to LA County Jail or give them a citation, essentially release them. So that happened. Oh, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago. They don't know of any inmates, at least at that point, weren't aware of any inmates who had it, but there were several jail staffers. They basically had to shut down their own jail.
And I think that that's an important point is the Long Beach City Jail. We're not talking about a facility for hundreds or thousands of inmates like LA County's Men's Central Jail. This is a relatively small facility, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's at the main downtown police station right across from the courthouse, and they generally hold inmates there for a short time prior to being charged or prior to a court hearing.
But it is within the police headquarters building.
Correct. And there are still people working in the police headquarters building. Of course, you have patrol officers out there working, but they're, of course, reevaluating now. Do they need more people working from home, or they're going to spread out their operations even more? Of course, this comes now, it's November and December, when we have coronavirus surging worse than ever in California. And the chief and the command staff who talked to me about this photo were very candid that back on November 5th, even though cases were already surging at that point, they didn't really grasp how serious this was. It's hard to go back in your mind, but I think most people back then coronavirus was not as top of mind as it is now, where we're seeing just a massive outbreak of cases and hospitalizations and deaths. But now it's a little too late.
We're hearing we've gotten a number of comments that folks have brought up about seeing officers without masks when they're engaging with the public. For example, they've seen some officers with no masks, no gloves, arresting people or stopping folks. What should people do when they see something like that? How are concerned people supposed to hold police officers accountable when they see them not following or when they have a concern? Who should they go to? What should they do?
As far as I know, there isn't a specific complaint process the police department has set up for the public. I'm sure people can submit a complaint to the department if they want to, but I don't know if there's a specific process for that besides the normal internal affairs complaint process. In this case, with this specific photo, a complaint was submitted to our local police oversight body, the Citizens Police Complaint Commission.
So I want you to talk a little bit more about that, about where the complaint came from and the community groups and community leaders that were involved in that.
Yeah, there were. So the complaint after our story broke, it obviously got some attention locally, and there's two local activist groups or two local political groups that are run by kind of the people involved in them are kind of a long time political activists, and they submitted a complaint to the Citizens Police Complaint Commission, which is our local civilian oversight body that oversees the police department, essentially based on our article. That complaint is being investigated by the Citizen Police Complaint Commission, but there's a long history with how much power the police commission, that commission actually has over the department. So it's not likely much is going to come from that investigation. The community groups that submitted this complaint use this as an opportunity to kind of push something they've been pushing for a long time, where they've criticized the way the city handles the police commission. They want the commission to hold open public hearings, have a sworn testimony from officers and the chiefs. Really, when you think of a congressional committee hearing, that's what they want to happen. And that's specifically what they outline in their letter. That's something the Citizen Police Complaint Commission has never done. We at the Post wrote a long story about this recently, about how that commission has never really lived up to its promise. The idea was to hold police accountable, and really what was laid out as their responsibilities when people voted to establish that commission has never really come to fruition. Instead, all of its decisions roll up to the city manager, who has control over whether any discipline is meted out. So the city manager could theoretically decide the chief needs to be disciplined, or someone in the department needs to be disciplined or fired. But that is a decision that would happen behind closed doors. This is not something that, in the city's opinion, would or should or would happen through the Citizens Police Complaint Commission, at least publicly.
And what's the potential timeline? So a complaint has been filed with the CPCC. What happens next, and when could it happen?
They do have a year to do something. These complaints oftentimes go through a quick intake process where investigators will quickly interview the person complaining, and then they will wait, typically, for the police department's own internal affairs division to complete their own investigation. And then, relying on the information they've gathered themselves and on the police's investigation, they will make a recommendation of whether or not discipline should be handed down. And then that recommendation rolls up to the city manager, who can essentially do whatever he wants to do based on what the commission says and based on input from the police department itself.
Jeremiah, you mentioned that being part of the team of reporters and editors that spent months looking into the history of the CPCC, where it's come from, where it's going. Can you talk a little bit about some of the proposals that are on the table for reforming the CPCC, both through the framework for reconciliation work that's going on in the community right now? What are some of the things that people are asking for this commission to do differently than what it does now, and what would it take for that to happen?
There's a few things. They want the commission's work to be more public. Right now, all their deliberations are behind closed doors, and the information they're looking at never really gets out to the public. The commissioners aren't especially vocal, at least until recently, about what they think should be happening. And they also, there's key pieces of information that the commissioners are not allowed to see. State law is very closely protects the privacy of police officers, and because the commission doesn't actually have authority to discipline the officers, they don't get to see the officer's side of the story. Essentially, the officers don't have to testify before the commission because the commission doesn't actually have power over them. Whether that can change is really up for debate. The commission was established by a charter amendment, meaning the citizens of Long Beach actually had to vote on establishing this commission. So this isn't something the city council could just take a vote on and adjust. It could also conflict with state law. So you may have to have a citywide vote to amend or change the CPCC's job, and you also might have to have statewide law changes to allow them to do their job. It's a very complicated issue, and that's part of why citizen groups like the ones who submitted this complaint are trying to keep the pressure on for something to change.
Jeremiah Dobrook, our public safety breaking news editor here at the Post, answering your questions. If you have any, please add them into the chat. With the couple minutes that we have left, Jeremiah, there's two other things that I do want to ask you about. You spoke a little bit about the department's defense of the event and Chief Luna's explanation and his ownership that it was a mistake. Have we heard from any other city leaders? Has there been any condemnation by city council members, by the mayor? Have we heard from any other Long Beach leaders about their take on this? Has anyone else spoken out?
Essentially, no. I mean, we talked to most of the top leadership in the police department, and obviously asked other city officials for their comments. The one person or the one department that has weighed in at all is the health department. When we asked them about this, whether they had any insight into why this was done, whether it was safe, whether it was something they would have objected to. And they essentially gave us a statement saying, we don't oversee the police department. We can't really comment on this gathering. I think the thing, though, to keep in mind, though, is as this event was happening, as hundreds of people were indoors without masks on at the behest of the police department, health officials, the mayor, everyone else in the city were pleading for people to wear their masks and not gather. But we have not seen any real public pushback from city officials or anyone else against the police department, which, you know, the police department operates very independently. As the health department said, we didn't have any oversight into this decision to have this training or gathering.
Jeremiah, you've reported extensively on the police union in Long Beach, the POA. Has the POA weighed in on this at all? They're a powerful organization. They endorse candidates. They financially contribute to candidates on city council. They are an influential organization, as you've reported. What's POA had to say about what occurred?
I did speak to them briefly as I was reporting this, but no, they haven't really had much to say about it. I know they have voiced concern, you know, they want officers to have the safety gear that they need to be as safe as possible out there. But no, they have not publicly taken any issue with the way the department is operating or the equipment or anything they're providing to try to keep officers safe. That doesn't mean officers haven't taken issue with that. Like I said, the reason this photo was even, I was even aware of this photo in this event is because there were officers who were concerned that this could have put them at risk.
Jeremiah, the last question that I have for you is we've seen what's happened over the last a couple of days since you published that you're reporting that this complaint that's been filed had been picked up by newsrooms across the country, from Sacramento to Seattle. It was in the Washington Post this morning. NBC News has covered it. Why, in your experience, why is this story resonating now? Why is this getting national attention now that this complaint has been filed, now that your story is out there? Why is there so much attention?
I think we're in a crisis moment right now. Anybody who's paying attention to what's going on with coronavirus knows we are on the brink of having a just untenable situation in our hospitals. And suddenly, plenty of people have been paying attention all along, but more and more people are realizing how much of a crisis this is right this second. And when you look back to the beginning of November, maybe people are realizing, wow, this is when we should have been paying attention to what was going on.
Jeremiah Dobruck, public safety and breaking news editor for the Long Beach Post. Excellent job reporting this story. It's certainly having the attention that our story getting picked up nationally. Good job, and we'll look forward to any more reporting that you have on this and continuing with the police department. For all of you out there, thank you for joining us today. And from all of us here at the Long Beach Post and Business Journal, thanks for tuning in today. Have a good day.